Hello, I'm Peter Fenrich. Welcome to Teaching Skills for Post-Secondary Educators. This video is based on Chapter 1, the Instructional Development Cycle of my book, Practical Principles of Instructional Design. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to follow the steps of each phase of an instructional development cycle model. The instructional development cycle begins with the analysis phase and continues with the planning, design, development, and implementation phases. Each phase provides outputs for subsequent phases. The evaluation and revision phase is ongoing throughout the instructional development cycle. The end of each phase can act as a milestone and a checkpoint. After each phase, evaluate the outputs, make any needed revisions, and, if needed, get approval to proceed. In the analysis phase, identify the instructional goals, conduct a goal analysis, conduct a subordinate skills analysis, identify entry skills and characteristics, write learning outcomes. These steps are described in detail in Chapter 2. In the analysis phase, you should also provide initial cost and/or time estimates if required. Determine if there are funding and/or resource constraints, conduct an evaluation, and make revisions. Why is the analysis phase important? Pause the video, click on play when you are ready to compare your thoughts to mine on the next slide. The time invested in the analysis phase tends to save more time throughout the rest of the instructional development cycle. Imagine a learning outcome that was not measurable. The whole design and development effort for that learning outcome could be wasted. In the planning phase, predict and address potential problems. Estimate the resources needed. Form the team, establish timelines, evaluate, and revise. Imagine that you will be working on a large instructional material development project. With respect to planning, what are some potential problems that could occur? Pause the video, click on play to compare your thoughts to mine. Some potential problems include whether there is acceptance and commitment at all levels, budget approval, a time constraint such as personnel availability, a realistic completion date, challenges in evaluating the materials with target audience users. In the design phase, write test questions for each learning outcome. Develop instructional strategies. Select media based on each of the instructional strategies. Determine standards such as for writing style. Finalize the resources needed such as personnel. Evaluate and revise. Why is it important to write test questions for each learning outcome early in the design phase? Pause the video, click on play to compare your thoughts to mine. It is crucial to know whether testing is realistic enough and a true performance measure. If not, revisions are needed. You need to know whether the highest difficulty level of each learning outcome can be assessed. If not, revisions are needed. In the development phase for large projects, create a storyboard for each learning outcome. A storyboard is a paper-based representation of each screen or slide. Storyboards help stakeholders understand what will be created. Create the media, select and develop instructional material, complete the lesson creation, evaluate, and revise. If the amount of money your boss is offering to fund an instructional project will only be enough to create a poor quality resource, what would you say or do? Pause the video, click play to compare your idea to mine. There's no answer that will satisfy all situations. As in many situations in education, it depends. Some possibilities would be to describe how learning would be compromised. Look for a partner who has the same instructional problem. Look for external funding sources. Determine if students could work on the project at a lower cost than a team of professionals. Suggest that the project be delayed until there's enough funding to do it well. In the implementation phase, evaluate a prototype and revise as needed. Evaluate all of the content with target audience learners and make revisions. Determine whether the material works on each potential delivery platform. Evaluate and revise. Implement the material. Why is it worthwhile to evaluate a prototype rather than waiting for completed materials? Pause the video, click play to compare your idea to mine. Changes made to a prototype can apply to all future material. It is far cheaper and easier to do it once than later having to repeat the same changes many times. Evaluation is a systematic collection and analysis of data to help make decisions. Test all of the materials on a wide diversity of target audience learners. Well, this point is obvious. Base revisions on the evaluation's data. Since evaluation is ongoing throughout the instructional development cycle, revisions are also ongoing. If major revisions are left to near the end of a project, what are some potential problems that could result from that? Pause the video, click play to compare your ideas to mine. If major revisions are done late in a project, there might not be enough budget left. There might be problems in that some team members were temporarily hired and have left the project, will no longer be interested in the project, are busy with new projects. Reflect back on what you learned about the analysis phase. Write down your key points to remember about the analysis phase. Pause the video, click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. The analysis phase includes identifying the instructional goals and developing those goals through to writing learning outcomes. Other tasks can include providing initial cost estimates and determining funding and resource constraints. The time invested in the analysis phase pays for itself in time savings in subsequent phases. Think back to what you learned about the planning phase. Write down your key points to remember about the planning phase. Pause the video. Click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. In the planning phase, predict and address potential problems, estimate the resources needed, form the team, if applicable, establish timelines, and evaluate and revise. Recall what you learned about the design phase. Write down your key points to remember about the design phase. Pause the video. Click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. The design phase includes writing test questions, developing instructional strategies, selecting the media, determining standards, and finalizing resource requirements. Think back to what you learned about the development phase. Write down your key points to remember about the development phase. Pause the video. Click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. The development phase can entail creating storyboards. Subsequent steps can include final decisions about the media needed, developing the instructional material, and completing the lessons. Reflect back on what you learned about the implementation phase. Write down your key points to remember about the implementation phase. Pause the video. Click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. The implementation phase involves evaluating a prototype and then evaluating all of the content with target audience learners to determine factors that will lead to successful implementation. Recall what you learned about the evaluation and revision phase. Write down your key points to remember about the evaluation and revision phase. Pause the video. Click play when you're ready to compare what you have to my key points to remember. The evaluation and revision phase includes conducting a formative evaluation in each phase. It is also important to collect and analyze data based on a diverse set of learners. This phase also includes making revisions based on the evaluation's data. The next chapter, Systematic Instructional Design, will provide you the practical details for each of the phases that will enable you to create instructional materials that teach effectively. You have completed the lesson. Think about whether you should reward yourself. The content in this presentation and the others in the series are based on my book. I wrote the book because post-secondary educators are hired for their content expertise. They often have little or no training in their profession of teaching. This interactive book aims to solve that problem by providing just-in-time learning in how to teach effectively. This book contains far more detail than is reasonable to provide in the presentations. If you would like the book, the link in my YouTube channel takes you to Amazon.